the positing of male evil, and female redemptive capacity. It's really just a kind of secular application of the worst of any kind of evangelical faith without the infinitely merciful, loving God. There is no infinitely merciful, loving God in the SJW ideology, but there certainly is original sin, and it's men's original sin. Yeah, I mean, it can't be exaggerated. Anyone who doesn't know the environment might think, she's just, she's blowing a few things out of proportion. I don't think it can be exaggerated. I've given talks where men stood up like puppets and said, I'm white, I'm male, I'm able-bodied, I'm heterosexual, so I'm just checking my privilege, and they had to do that mantra before they could even proffer whatever feminist compliant point they were about to make. And obviously they'd been very carefully trained that was necessary for them. And yeah, ever since Peggy McIntosh, who was a sociologist and women's studies professor in the late 1980s, published the Invisible Knapsack, which was all about how whites and males have this whole bundle of supposed invisible privileges that they had to acknowledge. They had to do the morally necessary work of examining the way in which they had these, what she called, unearned assets. In other words, they had all these things that other people didn't have. And they should, in a just world, they should be taken away from them. It was just a big, long list that she made up of mostly subjective things, many of them totally unverifiable. And of course, the really convenient thing about the charge of privilege, which is about the worst thing you can say about anybody now, it means that you're not qualified to speak about things and that you have things you shouldn't have. But the really convenient thing about that notion of privilege is that it's invisible. So it's a perfect trap. You either recognize your privilege and admit that you are guilty, and if you don't recognize it and say, I deny it, I don't see that I'm privileged, then you're doubly guilty, because not only do you have it, but you don't even recognize that you have it. So you're blind and arrogant at the same time. And speaking of privilege, there was a talk that Karen Strawn gave a couple years ago where one of the fathers in the audience stood up and said, speaking of childhood, playground and that sort of thing, a girl had come up to his son. I think they were both about 7 or 8. And she gave him a big wallop. I don't know if it was in his chest or the face or something, but it was a pretty violent punch. And she said, I can punch you and you can't punch me back. And so she, she'd figured it out, and who can blame her? And that was her privilege.
Yeah, I have a daughter.